Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're looking at an environment that honestly just completely defies logic. We're talking about a place that pushes the very boundaries of what we'd even consider habitable on planet Earth. We're going to dig into the stark facts, the wild geological anomalies that create a literal pressure cooker, and the brutal history of a landscape that feels like it belongs on some hostile alien planet rather than, right here in North America. So, if you've ever wondered just how extreme our world can get and what actually happens when human biological limits meet pure geological fury, well, you're in exactly the right place. Let's get into it. So, picture this. You're in an environment so relentlessly hot that the asphalt beneath your car is literally melting your tires as you drive. You pull out your smartphone to snap a quick photo, right? But before you can even take it, you watch the screen crack from the sheer ambient heat radiating all around you. You look down, and the ground beneath your feet is legitimately hot enough to cook a meal on. Welcome to Death Valley. It's widely considered one of the absolute most extreme environments on Earth. It's the kind of place that shifts in an instant from this breathtaking desert vista into a life-or-death survival challenge the very second you step out of your air-conditioned car. Section 1. The Ultimate Heat Trap. The Science of the Extreme. 56.7 degrees Celsius. That's 134 degrees Fahrenheit. Recorded way back in 1913, this staggering number still stands as the highest reliably recorded air temperature anywhere on Earth. Just let that sink in for a second. 134 degrees. At that level, the heat isn't just, uncomfortable. It's completely unprecedented, and it's a highly immediate physical threat. Normally, when we think about hot weather, we think, okay, grab a hat, drink some water, find some shade. But at this extreme scale, the air itself is your enemy. Taking a breath literally feels like inhaling fire, and the atmosphere aggressively strips moisture right out of your lungs with every single breath. So why exactly does it get so unimaginably hot here? Well, it all comes down to a spot called Badwater Basin, which sits 86 meters below sea level. That actually makes it the absolute lowest point in all of North America. And this massive, dramatic drop creates what geologists call an oven effect. Think of it like a giant, deep bowl surrounded by these towering, steep mountain walls. As the fierce sun beats down on the valley floor, the ground just absorbs all that radiation and superheats the air right above it. Naturally, that hot air tries to rise, right? But it gets trapped by those high canyon walls and the really heavy, dense atmospheric pressure that comes with being below sea level. So the air is forced right back down, it gets heated even more by the valley floor, and it's just stuck in this continuous, suffocating cycle. Because of this trapped circulation, there's practically no cooling breeze, absolutely zero shade, and nowhere to escape. Now, this unrelenting oven effect has some extremely severe, immediate impacts on both living things and modern machinery. First off, the ambient temperature heats solid objects so intensely that you can literally get second-degree burns just from briefly brushing against a sun-baked rock or even just trying to open the metal door handle of your own car. Secondly, dehydration happens at a terrifyingly fast rate. Your body is frantically trying to sweat to cool you down, but in an environment with almost zero humidity and blistering heat, that moisture just evaporates instantly. You can lose gallons of water in a matter of hours. And hey, it's not just humans that suffer here. Mechanical engines routinely overheat and suffer catastrophic failures out there. The ambient air is simply too hot to cool a standard car radiator down. That turns what should be a completely safe drive into a sudden breakdown, leaving people stranded in what is essentially a lethal trap. Section 2. How it got its name. The human toll. The name Death Valley isn't just some dramatic marketing ploy dreamed up to attract thrill seekers. It was earned the hard way, and it was paid for with human lives. Back in the winter of 1849, groups of pioneers heading out to the California goldfields tried to take what they thought was going to be a quick shortcut across this huge unmapped valley. They basically walked blind right into a geological oven. They were totally unprepared for the maze of salt flats, the complete and utter lack of fresh water, and the massive mountain ranges blocking their way out. For weeks, they endured just unimaginable suffering. They even had to slaughter their own oxen to survive and burn their wagons for fuel. Tragically, not everyone made it. When the survivors finally found a route out of that punishing basin, one of them looked back from the mountains at that blinding white landscape that almost killed them and reportedly uttered this simple, haunting phrase, "Goodbye, Death Valley." The dread captured in those words was so profound that the name just stuck forever. Section 3. The Mystery of Moving Rocks. Racetrack Playa. Okay, let's switch gears for a second. Imagine walking out onto a vast, perfectly flat, spectacularly dry mudbed, and you witness something that totally defies the laws of physics. Rocks that seem to move entirely on their own.
And I'm not talking about little pebbles getting kicked around by the wind either. We're talking about massive rocks, some weighing hundreds of kilograms, just sitting quietly at the end of these long, deliberately scraped trails grooved deep into the dry mud. For decades, this spot, known as Racetrack Playa, completely baffled scientists and tourists alike. There were zero human footprints around these boulders, no animal tracks pushing them. There wasn't even a slope for them to roll down, just heavy, solid boulders that apparently decided to slowly glide across the desert floor all by themselves when nobody was looking. It felt completely unnatural, almost supernatural. It was a true geological locked room mystery.
But as you know, science always looks for an answer. And researchers finally caught this phenomenon in action, revealing a brilliant little secret known as the movement equation. It basically requires a super rare perfect storm of exact conditions. During the winter months, a rare rainstorm or melted snow will flood the flat playa, creating this very shallow pond across the mud. Then, during the freezing desert nights, the temperature drops just enough to freeze the top layer of that shallow water into remarkably thin sheets of ice. We're talking sometimes only millimeters thick. When the sun comes up the next morning, that thin ice starts to melt and break apart into large floating panels. If a light but steady wind picks up right then, it pushes against those floating ice panels. The ice acts just like a sail, shoving those massive rocks right along the ultra-slippery, wet, muddy floor underneath them. It's a remarkably slow, eerie movement driven entirely by thin sheets of ice, a tiny bit of water, and a gentle breeze. So the mystery was finally solved. But I gotta say, seeing those massive wandering trails still feels incredibly surreal. Section 4. Surviving the Valley. The Modern Warning. Now, you might be thinking, hey, I've got a modern four-wheel drive vehicle, blasting AC, and satellite GPS. A place like this isn't a real threat anymore. But here's the thing. Every single year, tourists fatally underestimate this environment. It constantly proves that human technology is just no match for extreme nature. And the tragic formula is almost always exactly the same. A visitor arrives feeling totally invincible in their climate-controlled car. They decide, I'm just going to step out for a quick midday hike into the dunes. They don't bring extra water, completely misjudging how fast that extreme heat is going to shut down their central nervous system. Or maybe they're looking for adventure and take a wrong turn down a remote, unpaved road. A sharp rock punctures a tire, or their engine boils over. They reach for their phone to call a tow truck, only to realize, boom, they are miles deep into a dead zone with absolutely zero cell service to call for a rescue. The modern warning here is stark. Yes, you can survive Death Valley today, but only through meticulous preparation. Because this valley, it absolutely does not forgive mistakes. When you actually stand in the heart of Death Valley, it looks stunningly empty. It's silent, lifeless. It's this stark, punishing landscape where nature takes the very concept of survival and pushes it to the absolute limit, challenging literally everything we know about biological endurance. But standing in that sweltering heat also leaves us with a profound, lingering question to think about. As global temperatures continue to rise year after year, and extreme weather records keep getting broken, are places like Death Valley just isolated, fascinating geological anomalies? Or are they actually a grim, undeniable preview of what much more of our world might one day become? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious and keep exploring.